What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So we're on to week 3 of the July internationals. The teams are being announced. We've already done the preview for the South Africa versus Wales game and the New Zealand versus Ireland game. They're up on the channel. Go check them out after this one. This time it's going to be the turn of Australia versus England. Now, last week, this game went a little bit different to how I thought. Again, all the games so far, I feel like I'm saying that for. I really thought Australia did really well in that first test. They looked to be dominant. They looked in charge. I really thought they were going to be able to do what they did at the end of that game and just do it for the full game. But England last week changed the dynamics. It's what we really expected them to do. Go back to playing the forwards. Go back to playing how England used to play a couple of years ago. Just keep taking those 3 points. Keep the scoreboard ticking over and just let your forwards do an awful lot of the work. And it ends up paying off. England came away with that win last week, which means we're drawn level going into this final game. Really looking forward to see this decider. So going into this week, how are the teams gonna shift it up? So let's start off with the Australian team. To begin with, in this front row, we have James Slipper, David Parecki, and Taniela Tupou. Now, James Slipper had a good game last week. Actually, I was quite impressed by him. Taniela Tupou, I don't know if anyone else felt this, looked a little bit tired to me last week. Didn't really look like he was getting going that much. He got a try, absolutely. But in terms of like the scrummaging work, I definitely feel like Ellis Genge was in charge in terms of that scrum on his area. I didn't really feel like his running game was necessarily the best. His handling game wasn't necessarily the best. Did get himself over that try line. He's just a really hard guy to stop in that last 2 meters. He's a big boy, you know. Pray whoever manages to get in front of him. But I don't know. I actually wasn't that impressed with Taniela Tupou. He looks like he's also lost a bit of weight. I'm sure some more hardcore Australian watchers can let me know if that is true. It looked like he'd slimmed down a bit as well. Lost that power game maybe a little bit. Maybe that was beginning to affect him. In the lock department, Nick Frost and Matt Phillip. The line-out last week, I can't even really remember the line-out last week. I don't really feel like they were getting necessarily beaten. That might be completely wrong. But they looked like they were doing a good enough job. Again, a couple of these lads were coming in on debuts and stuff, so still managing to hold out pretty well. I'm not sure about this lock department, if it's still necessarily the strongest they have just in Australia with a couple of the people, so it'll be an area to keep an eye on. In the back row, Harry Wilson coming in, Michael Hooper and Rob Valentini. Now, Harry Wilson, I don't know a lot about, so I'm going to keep a bit of a close eye on him, but Michael Hooper and Valentini, we know what they bring to the team. Michael Hooper, again, last week, just in terms of the breakdown, he's so good. He's so good. You feel so bad when he don't manage to come away with a win with how hard Michael Hooper works in those games. So looking forward to see from him. In the halfback partnership, Nick White and Lola Seo retain that halfback partnership. I did feel Nick White was a bit slow last week in terms of recycling the ball from the back of those scrums. It was, especially when they were getting closer towards the England line, really struggling to actually get the ball away at speed. No, they got towards the England line that much. If I remember rightly, didn't they get to like 2 trips into the England 22 after like 50 minutes or something? They really struggled to get that far up. Speed of the ball won't be helping with that. You know, England defence is pretty solid, especially on a blitz defence that England like to play with all their forwards and stuff. So, you know, got to be speeding up there. Lola Seo didn't have a bad game, actually. He got tackled a couple times and just got sort of run over by England forwards. But in terms of the kicking game, was relatively decent. I just wish they'd gone for a post. There was a couple of occasions in that game where they had the opportunity to go for the 3, kept going for this corner, and the England forwards just seemed to be dominant. I would have just liked to see them take those 3 points, just keep getting closer and closer to England, had that catch-up go a little bit better for them. In the centre partnership, we have Samu Karevi and Hunter Paisami. Now, this is a centre partnership I think is working really well. I probably wouldn't be messing about with this too much. Now, Samu Karevi's playing really well on that inside centre. He's got a good boot on him as well, so he's not just playing like a standard 12. He's also kicking the ball, making good ground for them. Hunter Paisami's finding that room. He's one of the few players actually beginning to find room in that England backline last week. So I think keeping them there is a really good move. And then finally in the back 3, Corio Betty, Tom Wright, and the return of Reece Hodge. Now, this was a name that I said when we did the initial announcement of the Australian team. I was really surprised to not be seeing Reece Hodge go on in this sort of tour. I would have thought those last minute 3-pointers to win a game, you want long range kicking. This will add a bit of a different dynamic to this game now. He's perfectly capable of hitting posts and from, you know, beyond the halfway line, really. So England going to have to watch their discipline for that. Tom Wright, I thought, had a really good game last week. I didn't really feel like I got to talk enough about him. I thought he had a really, really good game. So nice to see him retaining that right wing. I don't really know what's happened to Andrew Kellaway. I don't know if he picked up an injury or something. So, but he's just sort of been dropped out of this team. I didn't think he had a bad first test, so I imagine it must have been a knock somewhere. And then in terms of the reserves, we have Falu Fainga, Angus Bell, and Ala Alatoa. Now, I almost feel like that might be a stronger front row coming on for the bench. This is something you might actually see in this replacement set for Australia. As we look further down here as well, the rest of the replacement forwards, Rob Leota and Pete Samu. both playing really well as well. They're strong people coming on. And again, arguably, could they be starting here? This is a strong-looking bench. In terms of the replacement backs, Tate McDermott coming in. I'm looking forward to see a bit more from him. And then Len Ikitau, who hasn't been playing badly at all. And then the debutant of Suni Vulivalu. Hopefully I pronounced that one correctly. I really think this is a strong bench. I'm wondering whether Australia have begun to notice that England, in the test they played in the Barbarians in the first game, and even sort of last week, they're beginning to drop off. That 65-minute marker onwards is where you can begin to see Australia making a bit of a comeback. I don't know if it's a fatigue thing or just a confidence thing that they think they're so far in the lead they begin to take the foot off the gas, but we're beginning to see these teams coming back in those last few minutes. So maybe by putting on this really big bench and maybe starting players that really should be on the bench themselves and then having those starting players on the bench, it means you get to bring them on later on in that 60th minute. And then what you're basically relying on is the rest of your team to just hold out the game until that 60-minute marker, put a lot of these big lads on, and then actually be able to steal the game from there. I don't think this is a terrible move. I think this is potentially a bit risky. If you fall back like they did last week and, you had Farrell kicking all those points, if you fall back a bit too much, it can be really hard to mount the comeback. But by putting on a really strong bench, got some potential here. So moving on to the England team, who'll be really happy with their performance last week. Not necessarily the most exciting from just a viewer standpoint. They weren't really, really begin to open them up. They were just going through the phases, allowing the mistakes to come. Australia discipline, not great last week. The discipline from the forwards in the England team allowed them to win so many of those breakdown situations, so many penalties come in. Just let Farrell kick them, and Farrell's kicking muchly improved last week. So I really feel like it would be a bit of do it again if you're Eddie Jones here. We had a couple of people mention on the stream whether or not Eddie Jones would be looking to be going before this World Cup, and I really don't think it's going to get there. I think they'll just move towards that game plan now as we move towards the World Cup. So in terms of the forwards that have been announced, we've got Ellis Genge, Jamie George and Will Stewart. It's pretty much what you're expecting. Ellis Genge, impressive last week in terms of the scrum. Really nice to see him when he's in full flight. Jamie George, did he get over for a try, Jamie George? I remember they had that line out that sort of broke away. I can't remember if it was actually Jamie George who got it down. I just remember him being involved in the maul that got over there. In the lock department, Ollie Chesham and Johnny Hill coming in. Now, I do remember Itoje had a bit of a head knock, if I remember. It's like the first game I've ever seen him not wear a scrum cap for like the whole game. And it was the one game where you saw him get a head injury. So I assume there's a concussion thing going on there, maybe, as to why he's not starting. So Ollie Chesham coming in here and Johnny Hill. So again, arguably not the best line-out setup here with those two as jumpers. Courtney Laws fills in as well in terms of that line-out, which will help you a bit. Johnny Hill's been all right actually in terms of the line-out situation, but maybe not the strongest lock pairing there. So maybe the line-outs this week could go either way. And then in the back row then we have Courtney Laws as captain, Lewis Ludlam and Billy Vunipola. Now Lewis Ludlam's been impressive to me so far. Really nice to see him. Not sure what's going on with like Tom Curry and Sam Underhill as to be missing there. I know Tom Curry picked up an injury in the first game, I believe, and then he sort of missed out a little bit here. So Lewis Ludlam coming in. I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing. Lewis Ludlam's been playing well. Courtney Laws, like I said, for the line-out jumpers. And then Billy Vunipola been running well with the ball, to be fair. He was one of the people we were going to be watching a bit to see how he's going to get on at this tier 1. But in all honesty, I think he's been playing pretty well. On to the backs then, and Danny Kerr comes in starting this week alongside partner Marcus Smith. Portfleet didn't have a terrible game last week. I thought Danny Kerr came on and made a nice impact actually from the bench. So, fair enough. He gets to start this week. Why not? Mix it up a bit. Owen Farrell retains 12 and Guy Porter stays at that outside centre. One of the areas they're still not quite settled on, that outside centre. But it worked much better last week. I'm not sure how they shifted up the game. They allowed Marcus Smith to run a little bit more. They left Owen Farrell to the kicking. Kicking greatly improved. That'll be a real positive for some England fans out there. It was one of the areas that was becoming a bit concerning. Marcus Smith was missing kicks in the Barbarians game. Owen Farrell was missing them in the first test. So, getting them on board now, getting more consistent kicking, taking those 3 points helps you win a game. Nothing wrong there. And then the back three, Tommy Freeman, Jack Knoll and Freddie Stewart. I think this is the same back three we saw last week. So in terms of the backs, not a great deal of switching up here. But again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That seems to be Eddie Jones's motto going into this game. I don't think it's a terrible move. Coming to think of it, I actually think Jack Knoll actually played quite well last week. So yeah, it's nice to see him still retaining that right-hand wing. In terms of the finishers then, we have Luke Cowan-Dickey, Mako Vunipola and Joe Hayes. Again, these lads came on last week. They settled that scrum. They didn't really look like they were getting run over in terms of that scrummaging, so that's what you want to be seeing. Coming on from the bench, There's always that opportunity the scrum could begin to go wrong. I don't really believe it did that. Rest of the replacement forwards, Nick Ezekwe and Jack Willis. Now, Ezekwe is sort of trying to get into this starting team. I'm still not 100% settled on him and being in this England line-out. A couple of penalties still go his way. A couple of the line-outs tend to not go right for him. So I'm still not settled on that yet. But I know with like Itoje out, they're beginning to drop a few numbers through injuries now of who's going to be in this team. So we'll see how he gets on. And then in the replacement backs, we've got Jack Van Poortvliet coming in the replacement scrum half, Will Joseph and Henry Arundel. Now, Arundel, we haven't got to see enough from. He came on in that first game, looked really good. We just want to see him get back into this game a bit more now. Will Joseph is not something I know a lot about at all. So I'll have to keep a bit of an eye out for him. I'm sure someone will drop down in the comments a little bit about him, what we're expecting from a player like him. But overall, the England team looking good. A few changes, mainly down to injuries and stuff. It's not like they forced their own changes in. It looks like they've just sort of been having to make those decisions because of injuries and stuff. So Eddie Jones will be wanting to be just seeing the same game again, seal out the tour, I imagine. In terms of a score prediction then going into this game, I feel like having seen this England team and seeing the switches made in that Australian team, I imagine this test could go very similarly to the second test. So I'm going to say, in terms of prediction, I think England will win this one. I think it'll be kind of similar to last week. I think I'm going to say England to win. Maybe not quite as much as last week. I'm not sure whether Australia will give away quite as many penalties. I think it might be a bit less than last week. So I'm going to go for England to win by 5. That's going to be my prediction for this week, guys. But let me know what your thoughts are on the game, your thoughts on the teams. Drop it down in the comments because I do love reading through them. If you've enjoyed this one today, make sure to leave this video a like and to keep up to date with all of the rugby going on the channel, including some of the match reports we've got coming on. They've been doing really well on the channel. Glad so many people enjoy. Make sure you are subscribed just so that you know as soon as those videos go live. I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.